Hello and welcome back to the Social Matters podcast. We are three social workers talking about social matters, and today we are joined by a really dear friend of the podcast, Mr. Ben Lindsay. Woo!
How you doing?
Yeah,
Good.
I'm so excited to be here. It's like watching your journey, what's going on. I'm just happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. I think last time we had you, we were just all on Zoom, and Carleen was there. So now you get your time to shine.
Yeah, we don't need her. Like, she's got enough shine of her own. Like, you know,
poor Carl.
I don't have to be like, co-star. Could be like the main event. Doesn't happen often. So no, that was brilliant though. I really enjoyed. That was real fun, and we had a really good conversation.
We
so,
did.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh.
Am I the only person to be on there twice?
No, actually.
Exactly the problem, right? Always paying second fiddle to Professor Furman. Shout out to her, man.
But it's only you and Carleen.
All right,
the
cool.
two guests. And Carleen's never been in the studio in person, so this is I think you maybe have one up on her on that one. Yeah, you could text her.
The only thing.
Yeah.
One up on her. That's cool.
Should we say who we're talking about in case people don't know? And
Yeah.
Ben's got some vendetta against some poor woman called Carleen. We're like, who's Carleen?
I've got no vendetta.
So, Professor Carleen Furman of Contextual Safeguarding fame, who is also a dear friend and love of ours, but you are here on your own representing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, representing Power to Fight.
Yeah, just in case you didn't get
I was going to say, can we just talk about this jacket? It is all kinds of beautiful.
I want to touch it, but I think I need to see
No, you can
consent.
touch it.
Okay, good.
Touch it.
Oh,
It's cool.
look at that.
I like the consent.
Yeah.
Spot the social.
Yeah.
No, we're not joking about consent. Consent is
Yeah.
This is one of two. So the plan was to kind of design something and then auction it off for the charity. But then it got cold one day and I put it on.
It's all right.
It's all right. So I don't know. I probably devalued it by wearing it. But I just wanted to design something which stood out. And everywhere I go, people can. I've been stopped in the street a few times. Like, what is that? What's this organisation about? Blah blah blah. So it's doing its job. But it's also a bad looking.
It's a bad looking jacket. Come on.
It's so dope.
I've been saying forever about merch for social matters.
It's so
but
true.
That's our vision.
No, that's goals. We're trying to be like you, Ben.
Yeah, I just want to be like Ben.
You'll keep your hair.
No, actually, the way the camera is, you can't see the bald patch there. It's coming. Don't worry. It soon comes.
Just embrace it.
It's okay,
It's
yeah,
embrace it. It's all right.
So we've, started talking about Power the Fight. You are CEO of Power the Fight. Can you tell us a little bit about the charity, its work, its purpose?
Wow, all those things. So Power the Fight launched 2019 off the back of two tragic situations in Southeast London. Two young people were murdered, one of them who I knew very well. This happened in 2016. And my history is that I've worked in youth offending service, community safety teams. I was a pastor in a church, and very much was all kind of based around Southeast London, although I did work in Camden as well. And I suppose all those experiences made me think, what can we do to kind of offer a different solution to this issue? So Power the Fight was really born out of, firstly, trying to support young people therapeutically. Secondly, to support families who've been impacted by violence. And then also to how do we equip and train communities who particularly are front-facing with young people. So there's a training arm as well. So we trained over 16,000 practitioners, social workers, NHS staff, police, teachers, looking at contextual safeguarding, cultural sensitivity, looking at youth violence and knife crime, and trying to go behind the headlines and stuff like that. Yeah. And the therapeutic work we do, TIP, Therapeutic Intervention for Peace, is something which has been going for the last few years. We've worked with over 400 young people. We've seen an 8% increase in young people's well-being and emotional regulation. And there's a lot of stuff we try and do. We try and be the conduit between what we call air engagement, policy decision-making strategy, and ground engagement, which is very much around the communities. And we're trying to be that conduit, and we're all about collaboration and partnership. We don't believe in this space where it can very much be like crabs in a bucket, everyone getting funding. We're just like, no, we can do this. We can all eat from this if that is your aim, or we can all support communities in different ways.
Yeah, I love that. You always talk about there being enough space for us all, isn't there? You say that quite
Yeah, I think people don't appreciate. We're trying to change how we do partnership, and too many times, local authorities, central government, funders will pit smaller organisations together, and we don't think, well, how do we collaborate? How do we come together for the greater good? And that's what we're about. And so far it's worked. It's like we're okay.
Yeah.
This may be a really big follow-up question, but how do you think Power the Fight has impacted on those kind of like air engagement and ground engagement and people in general?
I think, how has Power the Fight impacted? Well, first and foremost, being in a position where we can collaborate. Not every organisation can be in that conduit space. So I think it's really important. Not everybody's got the frameworks. So I'm fortunate that I've got a head of operations and finance, or head of training, which allows me to have more freedom to be in spaces where I can actually engage a bit more freely. Most organisations don't have that infrastructure. So that's the first thing, that we, being able to even be in those conversations with the Mayor of London or Director of the Violence Reduction Units or other spaces like that, I actually have the freedom to do that. I think we've influenced how professional we need to be in these spaces. So a lot of the work I do, which isn't really publicised that much, is how to help other organisations with their capacity building as well. So smaller organisations are, what's your board looking like? What's your governance looking like? There's a lot of stuff which I do behind the scenes, which I think can help organisations get to a point where they are attractive to funders. I think the way our Therapeutic Intervention for Peace programme is a phenomenal piece of work which came out of research during COVID, and therefore normally people do the work first and then research comes off it, or you're doing the evaluation. We actually did it the other way around. It's like, well, it's COVID, we can't do the work, so let's go and interview 102 young people and 5 families and 20 plus practitioners. Is there a way that we can do that? And then that informs what we then deliver to the community around us. And because we did it that way, the work has just been fantastic over the last few years. So I've got to big up the TIP team, like the doctors and the psychologists and the counsellors and the therapists and the youth practitioners, all who have contributed to this. So yeah, that's just some of the things. And our training as well is CPD. What's that right word?
CPD.
Yeah. It's accredited, right? And
It's
that
legit.
it's legit. It's the real deal. We've got the stamp of approval, and which I think is important, because a lot of people out there will just be like, "Yeah, I'm going to train." Like, train what? And yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but we're influencing and impacting on multiple levels, which is always the plan.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love that.
So interested in your journeying, and I was interested also just reflecting on starting it in the pandemic, and how in many ways that it seems to have just really like enhanced or like increased your proactivity rather than reactivity. So that was just a kind of reflection as you were speaking, but also I guess listening to who you are as a CEO. And I love that idea of that, like, collaboration seems to be in all of it. And I love that you're like using some of your cultural capital in different spaces to help others as well. So just pulling on that CEO wisdom, and also the CEO fly jacket. We're having this conversation, and since we recorded last time in May, there's been the racist and Islamophobic riots, and whilst they weren't a kind of one-off thing, I think we'd really kind of invite your reflections on that as a CEO, in terms of how that impacted you and your organisation, and how you respond as a CEO.
Yeah, it's a great question. So that was crazy, like summer, right? We're kind of there, and suddenly we've got race riots. And I say riots because a lot of people would say it's protests. I don't agree with that. It was rioting, and we saw it across the country. and we saw it in towns which I think if you ask anybody who lives in those towns who are of colour or are Muslim would say that this has been bubbling, right? This is not, it wasn't a total surprise to me. So when it happened, I was like, oh, okay, these things always happen when I'm on holiday. So honestly, I could say multiple things that have gone on in the UK over the last 10 years. And it always is when I'm like chilling. So I'm watching a lot of this stuff from abroad.
So basically, you can never have a holiday.
Basically, honestly, if I go, let's learn, no holidays. But yeah, I mean, I think as a CEO of an organisation with a team which have got different faiths and different ethnicities, different nationalities, first of all, you do a check-in with them, how you doing, and given reflective space to kind of just talk about their experiences. But then it's also the communities that we serve as well, which isn't just hyper-local to South East London, that is like a national conversation. So in those moments, I probably go into pastoral and leadership mode, not just for myself or for my immediate team, family or community. I'll go a bit wider and use my social media platform to do that. So I started just putting some thoughts out, which I don't know whether people found helpful or not, but I definitely was like, I have to say some things which don't really feel like they're being said. For example, can we get the language right? These people are using a tragedy of these young girls who were killed as an excuse to basically be bigots. And some of the stories I was hearing from that, you get a lot of kind of messages saying, yeah, this is happening in my town in Middlesbrough, and this is happening. Like, when you hear stuff like the black and brown taxi drivers in places like Middlesbrough were afraid to pick up a call because they thought it was going to be a setup. So I got a friend of mine who was in Middlesbrough, and she was like, yeah, I need to get a taxi. I couldn't get back because they were like, we don't know if you're going to set us up to be... That's crazy. Or if you can't, your car can't go down a road, and then they're checking to see whether you're white or black or brown. It's like, what are we living in? So it was crazy, but what I will say is that it was the most predictable thing. If you look at what's been said and the level of media, which has been very anti-immigration, why are we surprised that this is the result? So I think we just need to be aware that what you put out in existence, what comes out of your mouth, will have an impact. And I don't think a lot of people, and whatever we think about the government, I do respect the fact how swift they were to kind of say, yeah, we're going to clamp down on this, and now certain people in jail, and so be it.
Definitely. It's just bringing me back to that time and how I felt and a lot of black and brown people felt, and I agree with you in the fact that it was predictable, and also what was unpredictable for me was how, I guess, angry or pissed off I felt at it, not just for me but for people who were like, okay, I need to go home early, or cancelling their trips and things like that, which was really, I don't know, frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think people maybe underestimated how it was going to impact their day to day. So yeah, my family were travelling up to Birmingham around that time, and for the first time we're like, should you be travelling? I'm not coming with you, are you going to be safe, kind of thing. So I think that's real. But what I will say is, because I'm older than all of you, I would say that this is something which I've grown up in the 90s, where National Front BNP were on my road, and we had to experience that type of threat of death as kids all the time. So this was eerily familiar for me, and you like to think things have got better, but I don't know. And the one thing I will say is that London, weirdly, I didn't feel like this was going to come to London. Like, you're not coming to East London. You're not coming to you're not coming to Peckham. You're not doing it, right? Because you know it will go very left, and that's the reality. But there are other places where they do feel braver to go to. So I was very proud of London and places like Brighton and all these places where it's just like, no, we're going to stand firm. And that was actually heartwarming to be able to say, no, I think there's more anti-racist people out there than racist people, actually. I've probably got a slightly deeper theory, which we probably haven't got time to go into. But I don't know, man. I sometimes feel that maybe some people, it's like, I don't know, nobody wants to say they're racist. And therefore, sometimes it's better to just be Guardian reading anti-racist than acknowledge or admit you might actually agree with some of the stuff which has been said. Like, most white people will not want to be associated with thuggery. But I wonder if you have a deeper conversation, are some of the anti-immigration views, because I got that a lot. Some people are like, yeah, Ben, well, I'm not into all that, but we do need to have a conversation about immigration. No, okay, cool, but where does this go, kind of thing. So I'm a little bit like, it's not, excuse the pun, black or white. I think there's a grey area, and the grey area around the immigration and racism and bigotry, we don't like to have that conversation, and that's not the easy bit.
Because almost when the extreme is what we're seeing on the or some aspects, what's not, the conversations aren't being had, are the grey in between, like you said.
And I had family, not my family, but I had people say, oh, in my family, we are right wing, but we're not bigots. So even for us, who are quite right wing, we thought this was outrageous. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. And now I'm trying to work out, okay, so what are your thoughts then?
Yeah.
And I think there's a fear, right? There's a fear of, and I get this, like, there's a fear of having maybe right-wing views, which people might be like, but we're just going to lump you as being racist. So where does those conversations happen?
How do we have a conversation about that grey, those grey areas? And I'm just interested, because we're talking about these recent riots and the toll, and you mentioned being in this work for a long time and Power the Fight, and I know you mentioned Power the Fight was started because of murders of young people, people that you know. I'm just interested in the toll it has on you as an individual, like professionally and personally. So like, question is, how are you doing, and what's the impact of this on you as a CEO, but also as a person? Because for me, just hearing about this stuff, it's a lot, but I'm not in it every day.
How long we got? This is that's a really good question, and it's weird. Not many people ask me that question actually, so it's a good one. I think so. This is going to sound a bit dramatic. You guys into Marvel?
Am I into it?
Are we into Marvel?
Right, so Avengers, right? First
Yeah.
one. There's that bit when Bruce Banner, at the bit where it's kind of like the big fight at the end, and he turns up, and they're like, well, aren't you going to change into Hulk? And it's like, well, how do you maintain being kind of this in between these two people? And he's like, that's my secret. I'm always angry. And it's kind of like, I think I can't speak for all black people, but for me, there's a level of, you're kind of always traumatized. So you're kind of always in that space of, I've had experiences, I've gone through stuff, personally, on a system level, what I see, there's this trauma every day. So there's never a moment where I'm just like, oh, I'm just not traumatized. It's like, no, I see this on a regular basis. Then it's a case of, how do you manage that? And fortunately, about 10 years ago, I started going to therapy. And therefore, when George Floyd happened, I kind of felt in a better place. Even though it was mad what was going on, I kind of wrestled with all the issues which I've had with race and racism and my own personal stuff which I've gone through, and I was in a much better place to be like, all right, I can be a bit calmer in how I respond to this stuff. That has continued. So, I have clinical supervision. I have good pastoral support around me. I've got a good friendship group of black men who we have these conversations in a more open way, which we probably wouldn't have done like 5-6 years ago. So I feel like I've got spaces to just articulate how I'm feeling. I've got this whole thing where I try not to bring my work home. Like I've written about this, where I've kind of like have an imaginary coat hanger at my door, where all the stuff which I deal with, I just take the coat off and I leave it at the door and I come in. Now that doesn't mean that in my household, when I have children of colour, that we don't have conversations about this. But I think there's a deliberate act of my own journey and trauma. I don't need that to flood my household at different points. So yeah, there's multiple things.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing journey. I don't think you ever stop.
Yeah.
I think that's the Hulk thing I'm trying to say. It's like, he's always going to be Hulk. And he's always trying to work out whether he's Bruce Banner or whether he's Hulk. I think it's just this ongoing journey of how do we as black people deal with the historic trauma and the current trauma and the BS which we just deal with on a daily basis, which can just trigger you. Therefore, there's this consistent, I'm always just on guard, which maybe isn't a great way to live, but I can't work out another way at the moment.
You just asked you the question about like, how do you manage, I suppose, in your role with, you know, as your kind of professional identity, and something that you know, you do so much in so many different spaces, something that you did almost about a year ago along with Professor Carleen Furman was to bring black professionals together.
Yes.
In Cumberland Lodge, and Huge and I were invited to that, so really kind of, you know, we experienced that. But just really would love to kind of hear from you, your sort of thinking around that, what not only the kind of lead up and journey to it, but what the like legacy has been, like what's been kind of left from Cumberland Lodge.
Yeah, so Cumberland Lodge was an amazing opportunity to bring kind of black professionals together. It came out of trauma, actually. Professor Furman and I were at another event at Cumberland Lodge, and we were only 2 black professionals in the space. And the conversation and the topic was all around child criminal exploitation. You know, you had all white professionals talking predominantly about black children, and you had like 2 black children, or they weren't children, but they'd gone through exploitation. They said they were black and we were black. And it was just every single stereotype, trope, experience, microaggression you could imagine was happening. And there was a lot of police in the room as well. So, you know, we can say whatever you think about it. It was just mad. And what should have been really a decent time actually turned into like a bit of that was horrible. We've come away, we've stayed at this place, and it wasn't great. So on the way back, we were just talking, and I was like, yeah, you know, this is such a beautiful place. Cumberland Lodge is like a royal residence. You've got like amazing grounds, you've got lakes, and it's such a cool place. But it was a horrible experience. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could bring like black professionals? And then that kind of started the conversation where I sent an email to the CEO. And we just basically was like, this is our experience. What are you going to do about it? And we got an idea. And it was relatively quick. And then what then came from it, I'll just pull this up. What camera am I looking at? This one here, this thing here, which is protecting young black lives, celebrating black professionals, was our attempt to try and readdress some of the stuff which we were struggling with. So, yeah, we invited, and this was the bit where everybody was getting emotional about, because we had to choose 50 people. And after the event, I must have had 150 emails from people like, yo, big man. And I'm like, but bruv, you don't even work in the sector. You don't even work in the sector. Yeah, but look good though. I'm like, this is honestly that amount of stress. Yeah. But the actual event was fantastic. We brought incredible people together. We had an incredible conversation around this topic of protecting young black lives, celebrating black professionals. And it was just energy. But, you know, if there's ever a space where you wanted to work out that black people are not a monolith, it was there.
Yeah.
You know, you guys will testify to that. It was moments where we elegantly challenged, and there was moments where it was just like, wow, you actually saying that? Like that is crazy. There was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of tears, there was a lot of good food, there was a lot of partying, it was just nice, and we had some really good speakers as well. But what came from that was this report. And I always have to read it because I can't remember all, you know, this is where Professor Fem would cuss me. But there was like 6 insights, and I'll quickly say what they were. It's like, you know, first of all, it's critical to name racism as a safeguarding issue. So that was like the first thing which kind of came out of the multiple discussions which came from that. The second thing was it's critical to value and work to nurture the specific contribution that black professionals make in safeguarding black young people. The third thing was it is essential that we create safe and inclusive services for both black young people to access and for black professionals to work within. Number 4, trauma-informed principles must provide the foundation for service and system design and delivery. Number 5, services to meet needs of black young people are under-resourced. And then finally, a need for collective action. And I think for us, it was that moment of just bringing 50 people together and what do we need to safeguard ourselves and what do we need to safeguard black young people. And it was one of the most enlightening, heart-transforming events of my life. I didn't realise bringing 50 people together was going to be so good for my soul. It was just powerful. I mean, you guys are there.
You captured that so beautifully, just because that's what it was. We came out, Yuja and I, and we were like, how do we articulate what that was? Because it was all levels of, soul filling and transformative and challenging. There were times when it was really challenging, but I definitely left there with a bit of a like, boldness. I can't describe, and I remember kind of leaving, going into work, and I don't know, it was a bit like the Matrix, you know, when Neo just kind of like sees all the it's like, oh wow, like it was a really kind of powerful experience, really transformative, not just for me in terms of my professional identity as a black professional in a safeguarding space, but also for me personally and as a black woman. It was just incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And I would agree with what both of you have said. The feeling to add to that is that I kind of know what's going to happen, or have a sense of what's going to happen in most places I walk into. So if you're walking into a team meeting, or you're walking on the train, or you're going to work, you kind of have you obviously can't predict, you kind of have an idea, so you're prepared for it. But this was probably the most surprising. Like, I had an idea, but it was completely not what I expected, and more. So much so that I think, as you were describing, Ben, the emotional roller coaster of joy, of anger, of frustration, of tears, all of it came out in those kind of few days and after. So I think it was transformative for me as an individual. It ignited a new fire in me, in the sense of like the power of connecting people in order to create change, but also helped me to reflect on, as you're describing, the kind of ongoing trauma. I think the way you described it is like, always traumatized, giving that kind of reference to Hulk. And I think sometimes I feel like that, but sometimes I feel, as this Cumberland Lodge experience helped me to connect with, sometimes I think it's buried for the sake of protection.
Oh, bang on.
But then things like this bring it out, rightly so, and then reignites your fire.
I think that's a really good point. Like, I think we Professor Firm and I underestimated that that people coming into that space would feel uncomfortable. Like we were just like, naively, it's black people, innit? We're all right, mate. We're okay. We come into space, we make it work, which is cool. But in that space, it was like, no, hold on. We're asking for people's opinions and views, and very quickly we were like, we don't all agree, which is feels obvious. But I think your mind is trained, even as a black person, that we're meant to just agree with everything. And it's like, no, hold on, this is not happening. And I think that feeling of being uncomfortable was it was painful, but it was good. it was really good because now you're trying to reconcile, well, how do we move forward with this? Because even there were some mad things. Even the term professional caused a madness.
Yeah.
Like people's view of, well, professional is something which is connected to white people. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you saying? That I'm a professional in what I do. You're a professional. You're all professionals. But no, we need to not use that term. I was like, okay, cool. This is fascinating, you know. So it went deeper than I probably anticipated. I was not prepared for how emotional I was going to feel after 2 days. I don't really like crying publicly at all, but I was a moment where I was like, oh, I'm exhausted. 2 days, I'm in tears, you know. Professor Furman's cool, she doesn't cry. So it was kind of like, I wasn't expecting any level of emotional support from her.
No, she tried. I swear, she was like...
No, that was such a...
was like,
you know what? She did that as a way of thinking, if I don't do something, people are just going to look at me as being super cold. So that was fake. I'm not even taking that as like...
What should someone do in this moment?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I better do something. I was like, get your hand off me,
ask
man.
ChatGPT, what should I do when someone's trying?
I was like, you need to get your hand off me. Honestly, it was hilarious. But you know, it's testimony to even in those moments you can laugh. It was funny, and obviously the next thing is like, hey, when are you gonna do the next one? I'm just like, it's not that straightforward.
No.
So there are some follow-up, smaller, like what we'd call satellite events, trying to break up 3 sectors: social work, youth work, and there's another sector which is education. So thank you, education as well. So it's like, okay, now we can maybe have a bigger conversation in a smaller context, and we might do a reunion kind of thing. We'll see.
Yeah.
Love that.
And where can people go? Is the report out? Like, can people?
Yeah,
get hold
so
of it?
it's on the Powder Fight website. So if you go to www.powderfight.org.uk and go to our research tab, it's there. You can download it. And I'd encourage people to read it because what is really good, it's got specifications for white leaders as well who are in spaces where there's black professionals or black young people which we're trying to protect. So it's you know, there's policy recommendations as well. So I'm really proud of what we've put together.
Yeah.
And I remember you two coming back, and you know, because we move as a 3, but obviously it's really, I wasn't on the email list. Like, Ben, it's really not your space, you know, and I'm absolutely fine with that. But yeah, just your reflections. It was almost like you'd, I don't know, been to a festival and had the highs, the lows, and everything in between. I remember seeing you literally the day you came back, and it was like
it was.
But it sounds so powerful, and look forward to reading that as well. You didn't make the front cover, either of you two.
No.
No, that's me in the shadow. The reflection in the glasses there.
But no, brilliant. And again, testament to you, Ben, for like having that idea and then making it happen. I think that's a special kind of person, because you could have left that first Cumberland Lodge and just been like, I never want to go back there again.
Yeah.
But actually like reclaiming the lodge almost.
Well, I mean, that is even in itself another conversation, because Cumberland Lodge has got a history. Even some of the paintings around, we had to kind of say, can you take this down?
Yeah.
Because this is actually going to be traumatizing. The history of some of the people connected to it. And they were brilliant. They really were like, okay, cool. Like even down to the catering, I just said, yo, we need kind of black food. So it allowed us to have our own caterers in there, which has never been done before. You know, they were really, really good, and it's actually impacted how they now do things as well. So was it lemons to lemonade? So that's what we do. We try and take every bit of pain and switch it into a positive. That's what you got to try and do in life.
So we spoke about at the beginning, the last time you were on with us was February 2022. We asked you if things were exactly how you wanted them to be in community, government and families, what would you be seeing? Can you remember what you said? Don't worry. I got it here. You spoke a lot about the community having a voice and a real sense of meaningful belonging in spaces. So we're 2.5 years on from that. How has this progressed, and what more needs to happen?
Oh, a lot more needs to happen. I don't think we're anywhere near where communities' voices are really impacting how we then engage in the structures and systems and institutions that we're working in. So that is not something which I think I've worked out, and I don't think it's just for me to work out, but I think probably where I would shift slightly now is that capacity building piece. It's not good enough to say the community needs to have a voice. We got to work out a way of how they can maximize that voice and also have a sustainable voice. And it's not just seen as like tokenistic. Like, oh yeah, we'll bring in, community Sally, community Bob, come on into these meetings, and then they don't really have any power, but there's a kind of tokenistic use of their voice. How do we actually create something which is economically sustainable, but also knowing that their voice has real power to actually make change? That is what I think is, if we can work out a magic way of doing that, that'd be brilliant. So, and I think there are people leading organisations in our space who have got that mentality, and that's how we work together to kind of do that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm trying to sustainability, long-term legacy kind of stuff is where I want it to be.
And it really does kind of emphasize the point that this work is ongoing, and ongoing in the sense of like not just going in, I do this a lot in episodes, showing the trajectory, but not just going in just one direction.
Yeah.
And I think stuff that happens can give us new understanding, can set us back, or can propel us forward. So we spoke about the Islamophobic and racist riots, is that may have given us new understandings to think about, okay, what does the community, or how does that impact how we kind of connect with communities, and what do we need to be more aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the community is such a funny word, right? In the same way culture is, there's so many different levels to it, and how one part of the community might not engage with another part. So even within that, the riots were definitely something to do with ethnicity, but it's also to do about faith and religion as well. So, like you said, the Islamophobia piece is something which I know I found myself even challenging some black people to be able to say, yo, like, you may well be of a different faith, but where's your voice? In fact, I challenged churches about this. I said publicly, I was like, when you're putting out your social media, talk about Islamophobia. Like, just because you're a church, just because you're Christians, why are you ignoring the blatant Islamophobia which is going on? Like, that isn't, in my opinion, of God or Jesus to ignore that type of stuff. So we got to stop picking and choosing, and we're all guilty of it. There's always our biases that we lean in towards. But I always say, if your social justice cause is just about you and what has impacted you, and not for everyone, I'm just not interested.
Yeah.
And I've been challenged on that myself.
Yeah.
People have said that to me. It's like, okay, you talk about this, you talk about that, but what about that protective characteristic? Like, where do we come into that? And I'm like, for real, actually, maybe I do need to write a little bit more about this, or advocate a little bit more in that space. So it's always good to be challenged.
I love that. It's so important. We're coming to the end. Final question. I know, sometimes, we'll get you in for episode 3, 4, 5.
Before Professor Firm.
Yeah. You guys have a bit of a battle.
Yeah.
But we've kind of spoken about Power to Fight, about your work, the toll it has on you, the riots, and the legacy of Cumberland Lodge and things like that. So holding all of this in mind, what do you think are the top 3 priorities for leaders in the sector to kind of hopefully create this change that we want to see?
Wow, that is a big question which I should have thought about before.
It's all right, you can have to think it out.
Top 3 priorities for leaders. Okay, so I do think the well-being of staff is really important, because as an organisation like Power to Fight, we're a charity and we want to do some great work. And the danger is that you can just be all about the work, because we've got this cause, right? So we're all going to go 100 miles an hour, and then the fallout from that is, and I've seen this play out so many times in my history of work, people do 70 hours, 80 hours, and then get ill and die. I've seen that happen multiple times. So I don't want to be that boss. So I think, first of all, if we're in this work, how are we giving staff the tools and the space to reflect on who they are, and therapeutic work and sport. That's why with How to Fight, every single person gets clinical supervision, whether you're my EA to my frontline worker. That's just one way that we can do that. So I think that, I think the sustainability piece is really interesting. We've got a mixed funding model at How to Fight, which means that we get funds from foundations like grants, but we're also trying to engage with corporates, high net worth individuals, and local and central government, right? But in this day and age, there is a challenge on should you be engaging with certain corporates because of their belief systems and all this type of stuff, and also, do corporates even want to engage with a charity which is very specifically around reducing youth violence, and how you pivot and message and all that type of stuff? So I think one of the priorities for leaders is that sustainability piece. Like, what's your end game? Do you have your infrastructure right? Capacity building, because too many of these organisations will start here and then go. So that's the second thing. And I think the third thing is, how do you make sure your stakeholders' voices are louder than yours? So how are you putting the community first? And what is your legacy for the community? Because I don't want to be the face of How to Fight for 20 years. I've done it for 6 years. I don't know. Maybe I've got another couple of years. Who knows? But that kind of legacy piece, and therefore, how do we make sure that, in our case, the young people and the families are the ones who are driving this conversation, and we don't get into founder syndrome. We don't get into this whole kind of, you need a strong personality to. You need leaders, right? But I don't like these organisations where it's like the leader is more important than the cause. And I think there's a danger in that. And if there's a cheeky fourth, it would be this collaboration and partnership piece. It's like, we can all eat. I'm not your enemy. Let's partner. Or even, I don't have to. I put this out this morning. I don't have to see you fail for me to succeed. Like, really, I don't. Like, I can big you up and support you, and it's not going to impact me.
Yeah.
And I think there's that ego piece which we've got to get out of. It's like, no, I can back you guys, and not think, oh, what about me? And we're human, right? So comparison is something which comes up a lot. But yeah, I think we've got to get more into that mentality.
Love that. And you always say comparison is the thief of joy.
I do always
And
say that.
is,
Wise words.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lovely.
But social media does that. Like, I'll come off
100.
social media for a month because I was feeling myself creep into that. I was like, oh man. And then somebody would say, Ben, you're trying to compare yourself to somebody who's nowhere near your level. And I'm like, that's your perspective. But I was like, no, I need to check myself.
Yeah.
So that is a really important thing.
Yeah. Completely. Ben, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and, speaking so powerfully about Power the Fight and everything that you do. We appreciate you so much.
Yes.
We really
Thank
do.
you. Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate
Thanks for
you
having
so
me.
much.
You guys are great. It's cool, man. Thank you.
No worries. If people wanted to find out a little bit more about Power the Fight, where should they go?
Yeah, so we've got the website, www.powerthefight.org.uk. All our socials are just Power the Fight UK. Don't bother following me. I'll just talk about Chelsea mainly. So,
You know what? I was going to save that conversation until after podcast.
No, we can talk. We can talk.
It's coming in here, Samantha.
Chelsea on the come up, man.
It's long, you know.
I know it's long. It's early days, but right about now, I'm happy.
Yeah, you deserve it. You've had a couple of years of trauma, but now you're coming back.
We could talk about Chelsea all day long. UK government mashed us up, man. That's how you can stop us. It's the government's fault.
Next episode, how Chelsea have been traumatized by the government.
Yeah, tell them.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah,
thank you.
you.
So we have been three social workers talking about social matters with the amazing Ben Lindsay OBE. Thank you so much for checking us out. If you would like to find out a little bit more about social matters, you can find us at www.socialmatters.org.uk. We are also on Instagram at Matters Podcast. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.